Of procurement and accounting units in government departments have begun a 30-day compulsory leave, affecting President Kenyatta's directive that they be vetted in the fresh onslaught against corruption. They are to submit information, including their bank statements and those of their spouses, and a list of companies that may have done business or may have had business dealings with their agencies. They will also give information on their assets, liabilities, and previous record of service, among other issues. The vetting process will also include the use of lie detector tests. We now speak to public policy analyst Alex Awiti, Amnesty International Executive Director Hilton Irungu, and engineer Chris Owanda, all joining us tonight. Thank you all for making time for us tonight. Chris Owanda, of course, is the chair of the Kenya Institute of Supplies Management. Now, what do you think of the move to vet procurement and accounting heads? That is our question. Keep texting us to 22422. Use the hashtag #BigQuestion on Twitter. Again, thank you all for making time for us tonight. This flips the burden from seeking to prove someone is guilty to asking procurement heads to prove if they are innocent. What do you make of this move by the government?
So first, for the very first time in many months, I'm in the president's corner. I think this is far-reaching. It is spot on. It looks and it feels good. What we have to make sure is that we protect the rights of the individuals to information, to privacy, but also make sure that we do justice to the process. And what we must then do is set systems that make it difficult for people to controvert and just wallow in corrupt practices through procurement. Because I think this is one of the places that we hemorrhage a lot of money. We are a 2.6 trillion shilling economy, and it's a spending budget. So you can imagine how much money is out there. And if you can basically shut the taps and make sure money is spent efficiently and value is given to citizens, I think this country will go very fast. So congratulations, Mr. President.
Forward is done. Okay, but this is to assume, there's a notion that these are the people who pull the strings behind the scenes. But do you think that is so? I'll come to you, Engineer Owanda, because you have already made your statement today and you have cautioned against this while you support it. Hilton, what do you think?
So first thing, I think we need to remind ourselves constantly that this scourge of corruption is basically catastrophic. I mean, the impact that it has on our economy, the impact it has on basic human rights in terms of education, in terms of our forests, in terms of our schools, and in terms of our maize, our agriculture, is basically just mind-boggling in many ways. I mean, they estimate like $1 billion per annum is probably what we are hemorrhaging. The organizers of the rally that took place last week, the Stop Those Thieves campaign, spoke about 25,000 shillings per second being lost to corruption. So it is catastrophic in this context. I think I also support the idea of intrusive and deep lifestyle audits of all our procurement officers. I think we need to be clear that this will not necessarily be, this is just the first step. It will not necessarily clear everything. I think what we need to do is move that to the chief accounting officers and then the tender committees and do the same thing with them. I think the other thing that the president could do to demonstrate leadership is to declare that he himself will undergo the same level of scrutiny and lifestyle audit that he has just pronounced in terms of the procurement officers, and that his cabinet secretaries will also do the same thing. One of the big opportunities we missed in last year, just after the elections, was not to have done that with the current cabinet and the principal secretary. So I think that's great. There are also interesting things that are happening. So the anti-corruption court this week, I believe, basically refused bail refused bail to. I've had a long day, so it seems like 2 days. So they refused bail, and they said that they will not have bail for the duration of court. And we do hope that this level of sternness is applied to everybody, and that.
Some lawyers are cautioning about that. Some lawyers are cautioning that as much as we shouldn't have this bandwagon mentality that as much as, yes, we want to fight corruption, we should also understand that there are rights. There are some lawyers who are pushing that narrative.
So you look at the scale of the figures that are there, and the ability to interfere with the court processes is huge. I mean, these are not murder cases. These are not manslaughter cases. But the volume of potential theft to the exchequer is so high that I think it does require a certain sense of sternness with regards to how it's managed, because obviously there is flight risk, there is the potential for the bribery of witnesses and interference with the cases. So I'm actually with the anti-corruption court on this one. It may seem punitive.
As long as it takes, as long as the case takes.
As long as it takes. And I think that's the key thing. The second thing I think is important is that, corruption is like an ocean. It's very deep. So we can play around with omenas, and in some cases, I think the omenas are the ones that we saw going into court, the family that has now developed a family business out of procurement. There are also sharks, and potentially some of these officers, I hope most of them are not going to be found guilty and that they are actually people of integrity, but these are the level of the sharks. The question I think Kenyans are asking is, at what point will we start to see a couple of whales brought before the courts? And I think that would be the litmus test in terms of the fight against corruption.
Right. They have not said, the government hasn't said how far they're going to stretch this, but we'll come to that. Engineer Chris Owanda, of course, you spoke today, and you are saying, as much as you support this, you're warning that the war on graft could fail unless the net is cast wider.
That's precisely what my two colleagues have also submitted this evening on camera, that this is a good thing to do because nobody likes the effects of corruption in our community and in our society. It's terrible. The hallmarks of it are landmarks of failure of projects across the country, everywhere. And we must hate that with all the passion that there is. But for it to succeed, we've got to do a good, deep cleaning across the board. If you take a spot of it, it's amazing that the two colleagues are talking about the procurement part today, and yet the people asked to actually submit for vetting is both the accountants and the procurement. But everybody thinks it's only the procurement people. Okay, so really what I'm saying is that the procurement process cuts across many processes within many departments within a company and an organization, and we need to address all the touch points where value touches, where specifications are defined, where goods are received, so that at the end of the day, we deal with everybody who is deemed, who is proven corrupt, so that we get rid of this scourge once and for all. If we have the determination of the president, as he has done now, and we support him for that, then we must use that window to do a deep, wide cleaning across the board. I'm glad that in this statement, he said this is the first batch. So we expect similar batches across the board.
Although they haven't announced what those batches will be, or how exactly this vetting exercise is going to be undertaken. But can procurement officers, I mean, they're the first step, but do you think they can make these brazen decisions without the support of powerful people behind them?
I think, as Chris has said, this is a lot of people. This is a lot of effort. It's not just one individual who basically sits and vets, makes sure that the entire process meets the threshold of procurement regulations. The technical procurement people who basically make the specifications, the engineers who will inspect roads, who know quantities and stuff that needs to be used. So this is just about everyone involved in moving things, in building government projects. And I think at the end of the day, the buck must stop with the chief accounting officer in the ministry.
You're talking about
because it is under their watch.
And the CEOs.
And the CEOs. Because I think it is one thing, basically, to go after the herdsman, and there's the owner of the herd. Basically, these are people who serve at the pleasure and under the supervision of much senior officials whose pay grade permits them to peer into every deal and everything that the government gets committed to. And they haven't done their job very clearly. And we can see that at the National Youth Service. And the president is right to ask those individuals to step aside. But he must go deeper, as my colleagues have said. This has to be extremely surgical, painful, intrusive, to send a very strong signal that nobody messes with public resources. As the president said in his State of the Nation address, there shall be no easy shilling.
Okay.
There's an issue, there's an interesting, so first of all, we're clear that we need the collaboration of all the institutions. One of the things that's been interesting, I think, in the last week is really seeing the collaboration between the National Intelligence, the DPP and the Criminal Investigation Department. And I think we need to acknowledge that there is leadership in those three institutions in terms of this particular one. But there is one other institution that we have not heard from, and that's the Financial Reporting Center. And that was set up essentially to monitor laundering and illicit financial flows. And my question at this point is, these amounts of monies cannot be sitting in people's homes. They have to have passed through banks at some point. Why aren't we seeing a similar probe in terms of some of the banks and how they've managed these resources? And let me throw something at Chris's team, the Kenya Institute for Supplies Management. At what point do you start censuring procurement officers and be barring them from the institute or stripping them of their certificates? At what point is there a list on your website of procurement officers that can no longer deserve the trust of the institute? And I just before we came on, I looked to see if there was something like that on your website. But I think the role of professional associations and institutes has to be as direct and as focused as government institutions. I don't know, Chris, if you want to respond.
Yep.
Maybe you're doing this and I'm not saying it.
We do have a code of ethics at the Kenyans of Supplies Management, which we actually publish, which we also go around the country. Believe you me, Hussein, we speak to over 4,000 practitioners every year within organizations, in workshops, and we preach the code of ethics, what you need to do as a professional procurement officer. Now, for us to delist somebody, it's got to come at the end of a proven investigation. Investigations that are not in our hands, that are in the hands of other agencies. And you know what the history of investigations is in our country with regard to this. But once such people do come to our attention, we do deregister them. And we actually put up even adverts, we have deregistered so and so from the practice. But we'd love to do more because we hear many more cases, but we need the proof on our hands to ensure that we do that. We ourselves do not have investigative capabilities.
So let me push you a little bit, Chris, on this one. So the Chapter 6 essentially sets out a leadership integrity principle that is a moral, ethical code, not a legal presumption of guilt. Now, my question to you is, are you not saying the same thing that the government has been saying for the last 5 years, that until somebody goes through the entire process, let me just walk you through this, some cases 10 years. So you have to be prosecuted, you have to go through court cases, there will be an appeal, you have to be convicted, and then when you're finally convicted, then we can do something about this. At that point, that officer has the opportunity to do repeat offenses and become a serial offender. Why aren't you actually suspending them while they are under investigation, so that period they do not carry the, I guess what you'd call the brand of your institute, while we are watching them on national television?
And as he responds to that, what is the effect of the opposite? Right. Because you're talking about taking a lot of time in court, 1 year, appeal, 2 years, 3 years.
It's
all this time you haven't proven
right.
if this person is guilty or not guilty. Right now we have cabinet secretaries who were suspended in 2015. Nobody knows their fate up to now, but they were suspended.
Some are even governors.
Isn't that fair in itself?
Yeah.
You think that's fair?
So let me respond to Irungu on that one. We are a young profession. Our instruments were created barely 8-9 years ago, and we are learning how other organizations also work, other associations work, and we want to learn more from them with regard to how do you deal with errant officers and what do you do with them, because we don't like them. Yeah, they are actually besmirching the name of the profession. The Kenya Supplies Management stands for ethical procurement.
Yeah, absolutely.
And over the last 10 years, we've actually participated with academia or with professional institutes to grow the number from just a few hundreds. Now we've got over 15,000 members. So we've on the supply side, we've grown a number of members, and we're saying, you are providing the procurement leadership in this country, you need to be ethical in the way you do things. But we can be tougher in the way we manage the discipline aspect. That's something that we need to learn how to do that without presuming people are guilty before they're actually proven guilty. So that balance has to be treaded. But by and large, KSM, the Kenya Supplies Management, says we don't condone corruption. And anybody who is found to be corrupt within our practice is somebody we blacklist. We don't want them in our midst.
In the meantime, as the courts try to determine whether they're guilty or not, a precedent has already been set that people have been denied bail. I don't know how long that's going to take. Of course, different views about that. I want to look again at some of those, the information that I just we highlighted earlier. Some of the information that these people are supposed to hand over to the vetting team. Again, as I said, the government hasn't been clear who's vetting or how the vetting exercise is going to happen. But looking at issues like this, bank statements for both the heads of procurement and accounting officers, and bank statements of their spouses, and a list of companies that may have had business dealings with the agencies. Also giving information on your assets, liabilities, and previous records of service. They have not told us, again, I repeat, the government, the criteria that we use. But the presumption here is like bank statements, if we see money, if money has been seen to have been moving through their bank statements, or their asset portfolios have grown then it means these people could be
benefiting from.
axed.
Yeah.
Is that what you think? And if that is the case, how good or dangerous is that going upwards now to CEOs, principal secretaries, and cabinet secretaries? Alex.
But you see, the thing, Hussein, this is actually reinventing the wheel. I don't even know why we are asking them to do this. We should pull out their wealth declaration records because this is a requirement.
They do that every year.
They do that
It's in
every
the
year.
file.
So let's pull that out. And I think what we should basically then look at is, has anything changed? But first, before they even present these things, we should have some data on them. But I also would suspect, as a good cop would do, that before we ask them to submit any information that the investigating agencies already have some information about them. They know their bank accounts, they know which companies they're affiliated with, they know what their spouses do, they know what these guys own. That's just good practice. And especially, because this is a very wide net, as we'd asked the government to cast a very wide net. But I don't think that all the 1,000 procurement and accounting officers are actually really bad people.
I want to make a comment about that.
We know that
about
there are just a few of them, and right now we know where we're looking. We know where we're hemorrhaging money. The National Youth Service, National Cereals and Produce Board, Kenya Pipeline Corporation, KPLC, and the Ministry of Environment. Now, those are the places that we should go in with a lot of surgical precision to basically now isolate these officers and really basically drill deep into this asset and lifestyle-related issues.
Hussein, Alex makes a very powerful point about the proliferation of this corruption and where are the hotspots for the same. Let's bear in mind that there are more than 15,000 officers actually practicing across the country in both the private and public sectors. And we keep hearing of these hotspots popping up and here, but by and large, we've got a very large number of procurement officers who are very ethical. They believe in the salary that they earn. They come to work and sweat for the pay and go back home and they're happy. They go to church on the weekend or the mosque on Friday and they are content with their God. They are good people, many of them. These few who are errant are actually a few. And that's why we support this process, that we hope this process can actually draw a line behind us and say, we've gotten rid of the bad people. Let's get on with the people who are left, who can actually deliver the mandate. Now, we spend over 2+ trillion in our procurement budget in this country. You could be hearing procurement scandals of 3 trillion plus if everybody was a bad person. There are many good people, we must commend them. And what we have offered the vetting committees is that we will come in, and we have requested also the other professionals to come in and offer technical expertise. Not everybody knows the intricacies of procurement or accounting. Let the professionals come in and be part of the vetting process so that they can say, you are missing the boat here. You are looking for a little grain here. Actually, the elephant is hidden this side. So that way, we can be useful members of the vetting process so that then we are sure nobody is being victimized, nobody is being left to let go, and then they join again the bandwagon. That's a big, powerful point from the Kenya Supplies Management we should make.
Let me push again, and we are friends. But my job is to just to kind of provoke a bit more of a response from the fraternity or the community of procurement and supplies professionals. So, how many of your members are whistleblowers? How many of them were on the streets last week and were demonstrating on these issues? How many of them are out in the papers revealing names of colleagues that are involved in procurement frauds? What I'm trying to say is that it's not good enough to simply say that there are a few number of people who are errant. It is more powerful to say that we are deliberately creating whistleblowers in this space. And I love the offer that you're making, which is that you are willing to put yourselves at the disposal of the Office of the President and the investigation departments to be able to deal with this. But I think that's the level of, I guess what you'd call that's the muscle we need to generate in our country.
Precisely.
There's another point that, I looked at over the weekend, I looked at the number of scandals. And it suddenly occurred to me that, we've got the stick. The stick seems to be working sometimes, and sometimes it's a bit like musical chairs where we have these musical crime scenes, So we do a dance, then it stops, then 3 years later we do another dance. But we don't actually have nudging or incentivizing approaches to this. Just to give an example, 7 out of 10 young people wish that they were procurement officers, not for the reasons that you would wish.
Would wish for.
Right? I'm sure 5 out of 10 dining room tables and dining room spaces are basically conversations about how to get a deal and how to hustle and how to get procurement out of government. So I think this has gone so deep that actually we have a ethical, we have a degree of ethical rot in this country that we cannot exercise by simply dealing with errant and rogue people. I think what we need to do is a couple of things very quickly. One is, can we start incentivizing ethical behavior? Like, for example, when people stop to pick up injured people on our streets who have had accidents and take them to hospital, there is no material incentive for that. When people run in benefit marathons, there is no material benefit for that. If I whistle, if I blew the whistle on procurement in my organization, there's no material benefit for that. If I file my taxes early and regularly, there's no benefit. Why don't we start probing the idea that anybody who has a certain number of points in the areas that I've defined would get fast-tracked applications for government services. So, if I can prove that I've done any one of these things up to a certain number of days, I can get my ID renewed, or I can get a replacement ID at a price. I can get free parking in the city. Perhaps I can have a matatu free pass. So we start actually incentivize ethical behavior, because I think what has happened is that the incentivization is now for bad, unethical behavior. And that is a big problem. It will not be solved by polygraphs.
All right. That was my final question as a roundup. The issue of
I didn't know that.
Before you got the final question.
You respond to both, but it has, of course, raised eyebrows, polygraphs also being used in this. To me, first of all, because of the fact that it's a fact, it's not 100% dependable. So why are we even using it? What do you think it's necessary to use?
So the reason why I'm laughing is that, many times the president has basically threw his arms in the air and said, what do you guys want me to do? I think what is basically, in my view, is the president is doing is throwing the kitchen sink at this. It's like everything that we have. He's so frustrated and he's so distrusting of the institutional mechanisms that we have around dealing with these problems. And that's why he hopes that somehow this multi-agency approach, where you have so many people looking at the same thing, might actually create some traction and actually yield some cases that would stick. Because like you saw the first NYS, all those guys walked. We saw the one with Parliament, Procurement, and a host of other people that were thrown in. They've all walked. We've not been able, as Irungu suggested, the whales are out there. The small fry, basically somebody got jailed at Huduma Center. They threw him a fine of 500,000 for taking 500 shillings. And I think these kinds of things then speak to the frustration the president has been experiencing over the last few years. But I think, as Irungu said, one, we have a deep ethical problem that has been in the making for over 50 years, long before Mr. Kenyatta showed up here. Then we have a problem of institutional incapability, which is just basically also compounded by very, very weak and deplorably problematic interagency collaboration, that they just don't know how to talk to each other. So the president has many, many problems on many, many sides. And basically throwing all these things is basically, is just gasping and grasping at the straw and basically saying, I hope something sticks. But I think what it also sends out is a very powerful message that maybe perhaps this time he's had it. And I'm really, really with the president on this one. And I hope that he sends a very powerful signal that actually begins to correct our moral course, because it is deeply in decline.
Chris?
I don't know how polygraphs work, but for the sake of moving forward, anything that can deliver results needs to be tried, as long as it's ethical in itself and as long as it's not violating people's rights. Anything like that needs to be tried to deliver good results. Hussein, 2 months ago, I was in this very chair, and I was talking about the Big Four and what we need to do to fix procurement to deliver the Big Four. It's the big agenda for the government. And the Kenya Institute of Supplies Management has been rallying its members to ensure that they are on board, they understand that agenda, and they are going to be instruments for the big spend that comes across to deliver the Big Four. So when over the weekend everything went pear-shaped, it was like it was coming home. This is what we were discussing 2 months ago in the studio, and we are here again to say, we as a fraternity of professionals, we're calling upon the other professional associations under APSIA to work together to support the president to actually read corruption of any form that is perpetuated by professionals, because the professionals are at the heart of it. Right. And we, as the Kenya Social Supplies Management, are saying, we can't deliver these big four, whatever you do, unless you've actually honed in and reined the procurement corruption and any form of corruption. And we are calling our professionals, the good people of this country, who believe in procurement as a tool of transformation, to actually step forward and start embracing what Irungu is saying: whistleblow, report to your colleagues, essential people whom you know.
Protection and support
and
that.
That's what the whistleblowing mentality is all about. That needs to be developed as a structure of delivering some form of retribution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Finally.
So I know very little about polygraphs. I watch CSI once or twice, 24 hours, but so I can't really comment on that. But I think as Alex said, throw everything at it and something will stick. But I think the key thing is institutional, kind of management. So I've really enjoyed the collaboration that's been there from the law enforcement. I think the second thing is to avoid knee-jerk actions. So today also on your headlines, we saw the case of kiosks being knocked down next to Moi Girls. Yeah. And I thought, gosh, this is such a terrible exercise of state power. The investigations are not concluded. There's no proof that the kiosks had anything to do with the rapes that have happened over the weekend. And yet you are destroying people's livelihoods. Flying right through our guidelines on forced evictions. And it's just an exercise of class power, I think, unfortunately. And I do hope that in the case of Moi Girls that we are able to find out who exactly did this and have them prosecuted. So I think knee-jerk reactions need to be guarded against. But we do need some disruptors. Last week the Director of Public Prosecutions issued a very stern warning on anybody who tried to stop Kenyans exercising Article 37, the right to assemble and protest against corruption. And that was not a familiar sight from a government agency. And I think that's the kind of thing we need to start seeing, that the government says, no, Kenyans, you have the right to be outraged. You have the right to protest non-violently, and create the whistleblowing culture that would make no space safe for somebody who seeks to steal or to grab our budgets.
Right. Okay. We have to wind up there now, and I hear there's a statement about that missing aircraft. I'm just trying to retrieve that. The latest we have on that. Right. This is from East African Safari Air Express Limited today. That's what their statement says. I'll read it. Today at 17:20 hours, that's 5:20 p.m. earlier today, Jomo Kenyatta International Airport Control Tower reported that it lost contact with a caravan aircraft with a capacity of 12 passengers, operated by East African Safari Air Express, registration number 5YCAC. Says the aircraft departed from Kitale destined to Nairobi at 16:05 hours, carrying 8 passengers and 2 crew. Such a rescue team has been mobilized by the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, Aircraft Accident Investigation Department, and KWS. At present, it says the statement, the East African Safari Express has no knowledge of the location or the condition of the aircraft or its occupants. Relatives and the next of kin can convene at Weston Hotel for more information. The crisis number, I'll read this out, is 0706 305 305. Again, 0706 305 305. SAC says they're in the process of contacting the next of kin and family of the passengers on board, and they pray for the safety of the passengers and the crew, and we all pray for them. Thank you again to our guests tonight, Public Policy Analyst Alex Awiti, Amnesty International Executive Director Hilton Rungu, and Engineer Chris Owanda, who is the Chair of the Kenya Institute of Supplies Management. We have feedback right now. Right, let's take a look at your feedback. On Twitter, on Moses Kimanthi says, the vetting of procurement and accounting officers is a good start in rooting out corruption chains. We expect more going forward. Dennis Rotich, government is on the right track to curb corruption cases. They also check on law enforcement bodies to do their part if cartels are found after vetting. Susan says vetting is okay, but what matters most is the after vetting action. Okay. Yatich says the move will achieve very little, if any. The process should be holistic by focusing on all the big fish, from politicians, accounting officers, CEOs, etc. Our SMS platform now, 22422. This is a sample of what you have been texting this evening. Maurice Onyango, Rarieda, the vetting exercise of the procurement officers is a belated one, but I support it. A retired working Kenyan, that's what you call yourself, says the vetting, if genuine, must start from the highest office in all ministries, even Harambee House 1 and 2. Every Kenyan could be guilty until the investigation is done. Obonyo, Konjiri, Busia, the government should extend the vetting process to the county level. And an anonymous, from a message from an anonymous person here, the vetting should not just target the procurement and accounting heads, but also the various committees that participate in the evaluations and award of the tenders, what was being said here tonight. Right, and thank you so much for your feedback and for watching The Big Question tonight, and thank you to our guests for coming. I'm Hussein Mohammed. Have a good night.